Yate, hello and welcome to Native Art Voices of the Four Corners. This is your host, Venaya Yazzie. Today our special guest is Venessa Francis Suess, and she's a resident of the Durango, Colorado area. She's a creative and artist and also a member of the Navajo Nation. Hello, Venessa Yate. How are you doing today? It's so good that you're here. I'm so happy to have you here. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, where you're from, and your background?
Yate she Venessa Francis Suess. Tabahanshle, Tachini Bashichin, Klasche Adeshiche, Kia Ani Dashanala. I am from this area here in Farmington. This is where I grew up. Most of my family lives in Shiprock in the Bagapato area.
Thank you for sharing your Navajo clanship with us, our system of kinship. For those of you who don't know, Navajos, we have a kinship system that we keep in place through our matrilineal line, through our mothers and grandmothers way back. And so Venessa told us hers, and she's Tabaha, which is a clan that's kind of related to water at some point, you know. So we're not related, Venessa, in the clan system, but I feel like we are through our artists and creative. Yeah, so summer is coming into the season, and the temperatures have been getting really hot here. But it's a time for things that you make. So can you tell us a little bit more about your business and what it is that you create for the community of the Four Corners?
So I make custom sunglasses. I make very, very sparkly sunglasses. There's a lot of bling that goes on. You know, I've done glasses for festivals.
As artists, we all have our own unique community that we make things for because you know, we make things, but everyone's going to gravitate towards what we make. Like, we all need sunglasses at some point. I feel like sunglasses. And it's also become trendy. And so your sunglasses are unique, I've noticed, because they have the bling. And then I did see one of your postings on Instagram where you or maybe it's in your bio, you put sparkle your face.
Yes.
I love that because it's so like your personality and your sunglasses.
Yes.
So tell us about the people who buy your sunglasses and where is your market here in the Four Corners?
So I have a really great community in Durango. I have a lot of really great artists who produce music. A lot of them are DJs. You know, I've made so many sunglasses for the different DJs that are all there. And so 2 weeks ago, we had the Animas River Days. So I just had a little pop-up, and there have been times where I have gotten recognized out in the open, and that was really, really cool. When we were in Minneapolis, we were going to a show. Like I said, I guess I didn't say that. My husband and I, we go to a ton of festivals. We go to a lot of shows and things like that in Minneapolis. And so we went to one of the little meetups, and I was wearing my sunglasses, and this girl came up to me and she was like, "Hey, are those shushas?" And I was like, "It's shushas. That's me." And she was like, what? And it was just like, oh my gosh. It is just the coolest feeling to know that other people have my art, share my art, or know of it. I'm just so grateful.
That's awesome. You're like a superstar. Literally, you know, you feel like it because you make wearable art, you know, and I feel like we as Native people, all people, but specifically as Native people, we really reach back into like our cultural identity and how we adorn and identify ourselves every day. Like if you were to see Venessa today, she looks very beautiful. She's wearing a Masana scarf around her head. She's got a turquoise necklace and jingle earrings on, and you know, so she's definitely expressing herself in a way where you could tell she's a creative. You could tell you're a creative, you're an artist. Aww. And I think that's very special. And I think when you wear your art, because you were wearing your sunglasses when you came in, people will look at it and say, "Hey, what is that?" And so it's cool that you can market your own work every day.
Yes.
You know, have you ever made your way, like trekked back into the Navajo Nation or any other like tribal nations with your artwork? And if so, like how has that been received?
I have not done any like vending or anything at any of the local events or anything like that. And I think that would be a really great market to go back into. I come from a long line of silversmith creative artists. My grandmother on my dad's side, she and my grandfather, they both did silversmith, and made such beautiful, beautiful jewelry. And my auntie Eleanor, she has carried on that tradition. Her and her husband, they just make really great turquoise.
Well, that's one space where you still have yet to conquer. You know, I was looking through your Instagram and looking at all the festivals you've been to in the community, and it just looks like people receive your work and just love it for what it is, because I feel like people who love arts, who love music, are very, you know, creative spirits. They're one of a kind. And just looking through your feed, you have some video of people talking and wearing your work, and it really seems to push out their own personality, you know. When Venessa came into the studio this morning, she brought some of her sunglasses that she had made, and some of them had specific, you know, names on them and names of DJs. And can you tell us a little bit more about how you, I guess, monogram them for who you do it? And like she showed me one that had the Taylor Swiftie design. So tell us a little bit more about how you decided to do that.
I mainly do sunglasses of the artists that I really, really love and resonate with. So that's kind of how I do like the lettering and things like that. In the market, sometimes when there are words on it, they sell. Sometimes they don't, and people just kind of want a design and things like that. So it just varies. The way that I found or to get into making my sunglasses was a couple years ago. My husband and I went to a festival, and it is called Planet V, and it's outside of Telluride. And there was this gentleman there, and he was wearing these big Elton John sunglasses with all these gems and everything on them. And I was just like, wow, those are really cool. I would wear those. And then just was like, oh, I can make those. And so I started doing a little bit of research on how to do the sunglasses. And so one of the things I feel that kind of separates me from maybe some other designers who do something similar as what I do is I take the time to sand down my edges. And so when I made my first prototype, it's actually going to be over 2 years that I made my very first pair of sunglasses. I used like sandpaper and started sanding it down, and it took forever. And I was just like, I started making a few like that, and I was just like, there has to be a better way. So one of my friends was like, get a Dremel. I'm like, what is a Dremel? And I found it. I was like, oh my gosh, this thing was like $20. Learning how to use it and the different little instruments that it comes with has allowed me to, you know, really step out of the box of creating different types of sunglasses, because there's all these little tools that you can use. And so I'm able to put the little charms on the sunglasses.
What's interesting when I talk to a lot of Native artists is we're all perfectionists. And, yes, you know, if you just look at it, it's a beautiful piece, but to the artist, they're like, it's not right. Like something, there's like a little tiny thing
yes.
off, and you're like, you wouldn't even notice it, because my aunt is like that. And I'm like, no, it's perfect. She's like, no, but there's this thing here, it's like wrong, you know. And I can see how you placing each little gemstone, it has to be just right for your eye.
Yes.
You know, if it's not right how you want it, you're like, those sunglasses are not good. But then they look totally awesome. Yeah. You know, for those of you who don't know, Venessa does the sunglasses with like gemstones. Can you tell us a little bit actually what are the materials you use?
I call them little gems or beads, you know. The ones that are like super, super sparkly, those are glass beads. And then there's some that are resin based, and those are really cool as well, because under black light, if you put it on there, they start glowing. And it's just so cool to see, especially if you're at a show with lights and lasers going off. And that's another thing when I go to shows, you know, there's so much going on, and you know, those lasers sometimes are just so bright. So wearing the sunglasses, I definitely are really helpful, especially, you know, if it's too bright.
Sometimes you go to shows like that, you get caught up in the moment and you don't think about those things. But so your glasses are very functional too, and they help people to keep our hojon right, our eyes. what does the future look like for yourself and your product, these beautiful sunglasses?
So, I mean, my parents have always just instilled in us that you work hard every day and you give it all your best. Like, that's what we were always taught. And, you know, that carried on from my grandparents, you know, teaching that to my parents. And so that's always, you know, having that hard-working work ethic, I think, is very important. I grew up playing sports, and so I can be really competitive. So, you know, I always say if somebody tells me I can't do something, I always just in my head, I'm like, watch me, you know? So that's kind of been a big thing, you know, reflecting on how much work and time and energy and passion that goes into creating a piece. You know, I think of, you know, my grandparents are no longer here, but, you know, I always still in my own beliefs in the way that I view the world and my spirituality of, you know, I still talk to my grandparents and I still talk to my father and those things.
No, that's good. I mean, like I said, you know, your art is your own, and no one else can make your art. And I feel like your personality really does portray this kind of art that you make, because I couldn't see you like being a poet. I mean, well, maybe like a slam poet, like very out there and everything, but like, you know, a poet's life is very solitude. It's very like thoughtful. I'm not that you're not thoughtful, but, you know, inward and empathetic. You know, you definitely have to have the personality for the product you make, and I feel like you, Venessa, have that, because you're very outgoing, and you have this, I think for us as Navajos, we call that, you know, hojon, right? You have that happiness, that beauty, that balance in life, and, you know, you kind of, you know, still have to navigate your way and find that balance for yourself, you know, because you mentioned earlier that, in our conversation, that you were an educator. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I feel like maybe that kind of primed you for doing these little fine motor skills with your sunglasses, because as a teacher you probably seen this.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's really funny because I honestly I was taking like an upper division art class at Fort Lewis. And so my professor that I had, she was really great. And she was like, you know, what do you think hinders artists? And I would just like raise my hand. I'm like, you know, I can't draw. I can't paint. I can't like, I can draw a stick figure, but, you know, and it kind of cracks me up because I have, you know, my relatives that make jewelry and things like that. So I just find it so interesting that, like, I can't do those things, but I can make stuff really sparkly and pretty.
Yeah, I think your sunglasses bring the global community together. As artists, we are knowledge keepers. We're cultural bearers. We don't think of ourselves like that all the time. It's like, I'm just making things, you know, but really when you talk about your art, you're sharing story. In Navajo, we call that hanne. Hanne is telling story. And in the Navajo's way of understanding life, every time we speak story or speak our language, we're still continuing that idea of creation. We're perpetuating it because we're still alive and living and doing the things, you know, whether it is we're a weaver or a silversmith or making glasses or paint. I think about, like, maybe in 100 years people are gonna find our stuff that we made and go like, oh, these natives, what were they doing, like, what is this about, you know? Oh my god, it's our legacy, you know? Right. Yeah. And so I'm sure your sunglasses are like national, probably global. Do you do online orders?
My sunglasses are in Bali right now. I'm so excited. I met this she's a yoga instructor, and she does these big retreats all over the world. And right now she's in Bali, and she's like, I'm gonna bring my sunglasses. And it's like, yes. So it's so exciting. And I actually have a friend. He's American, but he's living in Germany. And so he's another house DJ and stuff. And so he's like, you know, you need to send me some sunglasses so I can start selling them for you. And I'm like, that would be so cool to have them in Europe too. I actually have a friend who was a fashion designer when her late 20s or something. And so she gave me the best idea. She was like, Venessa, you need to go overseas. And she's like, go to Ibiza. She's like, I can see you. She's like, pack up your little suitcase, take it on your carry. And she's like, go sell on the beach. And I was like, that is a fantastic idea. So yeah, I mean, it is pretty easy to travel with my sunglasses and stuff like that. Definitely a goal to get my product out there more, and it is very cool because I do have my sunglasses all over the country now, which is just, I have the East Coast. I have friends that live in Boston that have sunglasses, Texas, just everywhere. So it's pretty amazing. It's a really great feeling.
Yeah, and sunglasses do have a native origin and root. I mean, because if you look at the Alaska Natives, which is our ancestors, the Navajos, Athabascan speakers, yep. You look at photos of their sunglasses because of the ice and the snow. They had to protect their eyes from that bright, because your eyeballs can get sunburned from light.
One of my best friends, she's Dr. Lee, and she is a professor at Fort Lewis. So she's like, I really want you to make me a pair of sunglasses, but she's like, I really want something that's, indigenous themed. And so I'm like, all right, like that's something, I have all these ideas to just figure out what I'm going to do with these patterns and things. And so I'm really excited. And so maybe that will be my new line that comes out.
Yeah, no, that's cool, because I always think that as Native people, we're so blessed to have our culture as our muse. For the artists, the muse is everything, because that's what keeps us inspired, And so maybe that's your mountain that you're climbed, that you're going to climb now, because you have to kind of resource these new ideas, incorporating your culture and your tribal motifs and colors and all those things into your glasses, and that's going to turn you to another level of how you make these.
Right. Yeah. So my dad is, he grew up learning how to do silversmith, but he didn't teach us, and we didn't really ask or anything like that either. But, he was always just blown away by how creative we are as a people. And I just always remember he's like, yeah, we're just so creative. There's so many cool things out there that, our people make. And like, yeah, Dad, that's cool. And then, of course, at the time when you're younger, you don't really understand that fully and appreciate those things. But now we are really cool. We make some really cool jewelry and artwork and things like that. And, being in this new community of artists, and to actually call myself an artist is just like, it's such an honor. And I'm like, wow, I am a real artist. Right. Because after teaching, like I said, I can't draw or paint and do those kind of things, but to be a part of that artist community is just so neat, because I get to connect with so many people from just so many different parts of life. Really cool to connect with people and just to try and be a positive light. I've been sober from alcohol for over 5 years. And so that had changed my life completely for such a better way of living and feeling inside and out. So that's always like another motivation for me, and gives me that extra step to just be really grateful for this life. I always think like, gosh, if I was still doing those things, there is no way I would be able to do this. So that's just what I'm really grateful for as well.
I love that you shared that, Venessa, because that's power. That's the strength that in Navajo we call that nihidsil, right? Our strength. And I've had artists come in and talk about their sobriety and how art has brought them through, because I look at our ancestors and I used to think, like, especially with Navajos, we are all artists in some way, or what's the word, creative. In some way, we all carry this creative gene that's inherited, in our DNA, because our grandmothers did it, our grandfathers did it. But I always think about how artists, as natives, as Navajos, we use art in a medicinal way, even though we're not really conscious about it sometimes, but it does help us get through traumas, help us get through, addictions that are social ills. And that, I think that's why a lot of us are artists, because you could talk to any Navajo and they know somebody who's an artist in their family.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
My grandma's a weaver, my aunt's a beater, my grandpa's a silversmith, you know? Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, I always tease and I say, well, when Navajos arrived here, we just got the art and we made everything better.
Right. We made it so pretty.
You know, we did. And I think it's because we are perfectionists. You know, we want everything to have that Hoja quality.
Right.
And that's just in our DNA, you know, because if it's not right, it's not right. And it's not going to complete that circle of Hoja, of that beauty way, of that perfectness that, you know, is a spiritual connection and mentally and physically too, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think, you know, just like you know, you live away from the Navajo land, but you're still creating this Hoja over in the mountains, you know, and making it for other people.
Right. Yeah. With like sharing stories about, you know, being sober and things like that is, I didn't know anybody who was sober. My circle group in Durango and stuff, they just like to be wild and whatnot. So it's definitely amazing to find a new community of people who really want to support you and believe in you and just want you to succeed. You know, finding that community was really great and helpful in everything. You know, I feel like my spirituality has grown so much more. And when I do tell people I am Dene, you know, and I talk about being, you know, living around this area around my people and things like that. And so I always try to talk about issues and things that, you know, affect us. And, you know, I always talk about, you know, MMIW with people and things like that. And I feel like that's really important to talk about those things that, you know, our people are hurting from, and that, you know, it's not just us, it's across our country with those types of things. So
yeah, I think we do have a responsibility too as Native artists to, you know, stand for things that have an injustice in them and try to make them better or help remedy them in some way. And through art we can do that, you know, because art really is just this space of, it's like a non-space, but it's a space where we can help or not help, but, you know, it's a way that we can kind of transcend into two spaces and help two types of people or whatever. But yeah, I think that's good that you realize that, you know, because as artists I think we have a responsibility to help people, and that's really what we as Navajos traditionally thought about art, you know, creative people, because we made things like pots and weavings, but the purpose of it was to help the people survive. You know, now it's kind of changed. We make aesthetically pleasing things they're utilitarian in nature, but then we don't use them. We just have them sit on a shelf. But, you know, traditionally that's why we did art. You know, so yeah, it's good that you have clicked back into that, Venessa, and you're finding your way, and I'm so happy for you. I just so happy for you, Shadeja, you know, because you're gonna make an impact, or you already are, and I think you're gonna do very well in the future, because just through sunglasses you're helping people to find their identity, honestly. You know, that's what good art should do,
right?
Give people a voice.
My personality, I feel like, after being sober, has definitely changed. You know, I honestly thought, you know, booze and all of that would be like helping me with, you know, just loosening up and being happy and all this stuff. And, you know, when I stopped drinking, I was like, well, you know, I'm not really going to be that person anymore. And it was completely the opposite of just being like finding my light and things like that. And so when we'd go to shows and festivals, like we would just kind of keep to ourselves, and, you know, it would just be my husband and I, or, you know, a few of our friends, and we just kind of, this is just us. And now when we go to shows and stuff, like, you know, my heart is open, and, you know, all I want to do is connect with people and stuff. You know, I definitely have my mom, my Shema, her personality for sure. She's just a big talker too. So, you know, we could just talk forever. So it is really great to have, you know, all the different characteristics and attributes from your parents and all those teachings and things. So I'm just really grateful.
Yeah, when you get older, you understand how your parents bless you, you know? So thank you so much for coming to the studio today, Venessa. I really, really appreciate it. I love it when I have in-studio guests, but I understand when we don't have them. So tell us a little bit more about where they can find your work on social media, just different places.
Yeah. So I am on Instagram and Facebook as Shusha's Shades. And I am in the works of a website. So I will definitely be getting that going soon. And I have the domain. I just need to create my website. So it would be shushashades.com.
Okay, great. Okay, well, so if you're interested in seeing, go check her out on Instagram. And other than that, I look forward to seeing you this summer. Maybe I'll see you at some show. Maybe we might both be there at some point. But I really wish you all the luck, and thank you for coming and sharing the narrative of art with us here in the Four Corners. Our artists have so many stories that need to be told, and I love gathering them from our living artists. So you're one of them.
Okay. Thank you.
And remember to keep that sparkle at your face. Thank you, Venessa, for visiting the studio this morning. And thank you for sharing your story about art and how the process of art is healing not only you, but also the people that you come in contact with. I think the whole purpose of art is to help people, whoever it is that comes down our path in our artist's way of life. For those of you who might be wondering, if you look for Venessa's site on Instagram, it is spelled SHUSHAS and then Shades, SHADES, for more information. Thank you again, my audience of the Four Corners and beyond, for listening to Native Art Voices of the Four Corners. We highlight and showcase the voices of the artists, their narrative, and their identity as people dwelling within the Four Corners communities of New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, and Colorado. And we look forward to sharing more stories with you again in the coming months throughout the summer and into the winter. Blessings to you. Hagoanat.